You're tuned in to the Binge It Babe podcast with your host, me, Candace Estelle. All right, babes, let's get binging. Hey, hi, hello, and how are you, babes? It's me, Candace Estelle, your Binge It Babe, bringing you a fresh episode of the Binge It Babe podcast. Today, we're going to be deep diving into a top 3 favorite movie of mine, Twister from 1996. And if you're thinking that doesn't count as a binge, that's just one movie, well, for one, just watch it multiple times. Or take yourself to the movies and go see the sequel, Twisters, which has finally come out after 28 years. It's been 28 years since Twister came out, and we finally are getting a real, true sequel, which is amazing. I have already seen Twisters. I lined up pretty quickly to go see it because I'm such a fan of Twister. And I will discuss that in the next episode, which I'm pretty sure I'll bring out at the same time as this one, just so there's that continuity. But today I'm going to solely focus on Twister so that I give it my full attention, right? So strap in, because it's 1996, y'all. Now, I am from the American South. I'm from Texas. I grew up in the Texas Hill Country, all over the place. I moved 13 different times. Or no, I went to 13 different schools. I definitely moved more than 13 times. Sometimes you can stay in the same school district. And every single time I moved, my family would pop in the VHS tape. That turned into a DVD. That turned into a Blu-ray of Twister. It was the first thing we would put on in our house. And then I continued that tradition as an adult every time I moved. I kept very few familial things, but one of my favorite things that I have always done in my life as a tradition is when I move, I watch Twister. And I kept that tradition all the way up until 2017, because in 2017, one of the main characters of the movie, Mr. Bill Paxton, passed away. And I guess I couldn't watch the movie anymore. I didn't put it on when I moved. I would think about it. I would say, "Hey, I can put this on now." And then I didn't. I didn't put on the movie and grab a pizza. I would do something else. I would watch Parks and Rec or The Office or something else comforting. And so when Twisters came out last week, I thought, "Oh, wow. Yes, I'm so excited." And then as soon as the movie started, I teared up and I was like, "Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm going to cry at the beginning of Twisters and nothing has happened yet." It's the opening credits, you know? Um, so we're going to rewind that back a little bit because I don't want to get into Twisters. But what I will say is that I have a very emotional connection to the movie Twister. And not only do I have that emotional tradition to go with this movie, but I also am such a huge fan of extreme weather. Like, I am fascinated and bemused by extreme weather. I have been in tornadoes, floods, blizzards, mudslides, hurricanes, all of that. I've done all of it. In Texas, you get everything except the snow stuff, you know? So in Texas, it would flood every single year. It felt like it got really hot and it'd be really dry for what felt like forever. And then all of a sudden, it would start raining and it wouldn't stop, especially in the hill country. It would just rain and rain and rain. And then, it's up to your back deck or up to that little levee wall if you live near the Guadalupe. In a lot of places, they have this wall between the river and like parking lots and stuff like that. And that water, I remember I lived in an apartment complex that year and we were on the third floor so we could see it. And the river had gotten kind of small. It's hot, it's midsummer, I want to say. And then there's this wall. For me, I want to say it was like 10 feet tall. If I'm being realistic, it probably wasn't as tall. I was a child. And the wall was here with the parking lot. And then you still kind of walked down and around the corner to where the gravel was. And then the gravel would take you to where the river was right there. And I didn't mess around at the water anyway because it's Texas and we got water moccasins. And I don't, no, no. So that river, I remember, came up so much that it was spilling over this wall. That is so much water. You don't understand. And on top of that, you have these people who will like go and drive in it, and the not in the river, but like the roads will flood over immediately, and it's so dry that it just like just I don't know how to explain it. It's just all of a sudden you go from being the driest, hottest place to just covered in water. And people will try to drive through that. That water will come through your car doors, through your windows if it's high enough, and pull you away. Like you don't drive through that, you know? I've done it a few times in terms of like someone else was driving me because I was a kid, and you see the water rushing this way. You're on a road going this way. That's a weird thing to do. I've also done like Moab, where you're in a big old like a Jeep. I was in a what was I in? What did we used to call that? I don't remember. It was a 4x4, 1970s. I want to say like an in oh, I can't remember right this second, and I'm gonna move on so I don't waste time. It's like a 1970s car. It's completely gutted on the inside. It's basically just metal and then the two or three sets of seats and the seat belts. You put a snorkel on that, or you'll put a snorkel on a Jeep, and then you'll drive through rushing water, and the snorkel helps like the water be taken away, taken away. An international. That's what I was in. Um, so I have done stuff like that. I grew up a country kid. I've been hunting, fishing, being the bird dog because we didn't have a dog, so that was me. I had that vest, and they'd go shoot like doves or something, and I'd have to run out and go grab them and put them in my pockets. Um, so I grew up like that, which is completely the antithesis of how I live now. Not because I'm against any of that. I just don't live in that area. I don't live that way anymore, especially once we moved to Colorado. It went from me having to dig a hole for our bathroom uh toilet situation because we didn't have plumbing in our house at that point. So we had no running water really. We were using like camping showers and a camping toilet, which is a 5-gallon bucket with one of those like lids that becomes a toilet. And then in the morning, it was my job to go out and dig a hole far enough away that I could dump that in. And that's not a fun way to live. I don't recommend it, right? I was like 11 years old at that point, maybe 12. Um, that's some hillbilly stuff, you know? That is the same house that I also experienced. One of the times I was in a tornado, that's the same house where it rained so hard that a piece of our aluminum roof, like the tin, came right off, and you can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about it because if it's that windy, you can't go outside knowing that there's that type of debris out there because a piece of aluminum sheeting, like a piece of tin like that, that's going to cut you in half, baby. That's going to behead you. You're going to lose an arm, a leg, your life. You're done. You don't go out there while that's happening. And that's very similar for a tornado because, a lot of times that wind situation that becomes a tornado. I don't know that that's how tornadoes work. I'm just saying that like that's the same feeling you get, that like debris moving things. I don't think I've ever been in a tornado that's above like an F2, and I've certainly never been in a tornado where it really destroyed anything of mine or like really very near me. It was like there it is, but it's in that field and it's just messing up that corn, you know, and that's about it. Or wheat. It's messing up that crop. And so I did grow up dealing with all of this stuff, but I've never been someone who's really afraid. I'm fearful in terms of the fact that I'm thinking, okay, I need to be smart. I need to do the right thing, but never like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I don't know what to do. None of that. I don't have an ounce of that in my body when it comes to anything natural disaster. I never have, and I absolutely should, because that and my love of this movie have made me reckless. I become an adrenaline junkie. extreme weather, it's raining really hard, if there's trees falling over, I get excited. In fact, 2 years ago, where I was, it was raining so hard that, like, something hit my house, and it broke my roof. It broke, like, 7 or 8 of these ceramic tiles off of my roof, and there was a hole in one section, and I went out there on the roof. It broke my fence down. Like, the tree was messed up. It was someone else's tree that just came down right at my house. And I went outside to go see what was going on. I am one of those people. And that is a weird type of person to be. Like, because I'm aware of it. I'm perfectly aware that me doing any of that stuff could very well be the end of me, you know? I grew up wanting to be a storm chaser because of this movie, because I lived in the country and doing stuff in nature was no big deal, and then because I am so fascinated by stuff like tornadoes, I I still would consider being a storm chaser. But I know that I could be that person that got someone else hurt because of my recklessness, lack of fear, and therefore lack of instinct to move fast enough or get out of the way. And so that's like my biggest life regret is that I literally cannot go do stuff like that because I could get people hurt and get myself hurt. And I do have to be responsible enough to not do that because I got 2 cats and a dog that need me to take care of them. Also, I don't think I could get a meteorology degree because I don't think that I could personally um do the math. I'm only okay at math, and when I'm not getting it immediately, I get real frustrated. Shout out to all you gifted and talented kids who now panic when you're not perfect at something. Hello, this is my ninth take. So, let's move on. You got some backstory. Now you know a weird quirk of mine, which is that I'm in love with natural disasters. And I want you to be fully aware as a listener or a watcher I 100,000% separate the event from the aftermath. I am not in love with the fact that natural disasters are becoming more frequent because of climate change or the fact that you are losing your home, your lives, your families. None of that. I am not okay with any of that. It is literally just the majesty of nature that fascinates me. And that's not the reality of what these things always are, right? There's always the aftermath. So I want you guys to recognize I am not a monster. I am perfectly aware that those things wreck lives. I've been really lucky. I've only lost bits of my roofs a couple of times and a fence. And so I hope you guys recognize that, like, I know that natural disasters mess up people's lives. And I am not condoning that in any way. I'm not excited to see that. I would absolutely love to be a storm chaser, to also be able to be there to help people and get out and do all of those things. Um, and if you've been through anything like that, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. And that's why I started this by saying, hey, I have been through all of these things. I am not some, city person from New York who's looking at it and thinking, that's a crazy fantasy world. No, I have lived this. I've been in tornadoes. I've been in floods where they came up to my house in that whole first floor and we're trying to move stuff. And, I've been in blizzards. I've been in blizzards while driving and been in accidents. I remember once someone went through a four-way. I was supposed to be going and went through a four-way, almost hit me. I didn't panic because you're not supposed to, but just trying to get out of the way, and my car just spun and then spun me right back to where I was, and I just had to keep driving. And I've been in a blizzard on the way up to visit someone in Colorado because they decided to get married in November in a mountain town, which is a really weird move. And I had to drive up there and got in a car accident, and a snowplow had to take me out. And I didn't hit anything. Well, I hit black ice, but like I've been through a lot of it. I've never experienced the most extreme horrible pieces of it, but I have experienced that. So I just hope you guys understand that when you hear me saying that I love stuff like this, that I do understand it. I have a healthy respect for it. And now let's get into it. It is 1996, and then it is 1969. And in 1969, we already see there's like this storm system coming through, right? It's gray, it's gigantic, it's gray to the point that it's almost black. And then we hear wind chimes just going bananas. We hear a dog barking. We hear a little girl. And I don't know if I am right, but I'm pretty sure. I think the little girl is Alexa Vega from Spy Kids, which is really interesting. And the little girl is Little Joe, which we'll learn later. And Joe is one of the two main characters. It's Helen Hunt. I'm pretty sure this is Alexa Vega. Playing her as a child. It's 1969. There's a tornado coming. The sirens are going off. The warnings here. And in a lot of places that are in Tornado Alley, you have these underground bunkers, basically, and you pop into them as soon as you can. And in there, you should have like a flashlight and an emergency radio, rations if you need it, tools possibly, and enough space for you and your family to get in. And so that's where we're at. We hear the siren, we're hearing the wind chimes. We've got that tornado twister score that they use throughout the movie, which I don't know how to describe it because I don't think it's like a violin or something. It literally sounds like wind, but I recognize it throughout the movie when things are getting really bad, which is where it'll go like, "Uh, and I'm like, ooh, that means something's coming. And we get to this point where we've got a mom carrying baby Alexa Vega, who we know to be Joe, and Joe is screaming at the top of her lungs for her dog Toby. And she's like, Toby, Toby. And I hadn't seen the movie in 6 years, so I kind of confounded a piece because I know, spoiler alert, that her dad's about to die. But I was like, "Oh my gosh, if her dad dies because he went to go save her dog, like that is rough. That is rough." And Toby's like a little Yorkie, which great callback for Wizard of Oz. We've also got Dorothy later on. Excellent. Excellent job. And so Toby's like, bark, 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 bark. And he's running through the house, coming with them. And then the dad's like, let's go, let's go. And the dad is not going back to get the dog. And I was like, oh gosh, what's happening? Does he go back afterwards because she gets so upset? They're all in the cellar. He closes the door. And then we hear the dog. No, not this dog. Domino, sit down. Sit down, please. Domino, thank you. Domino heard me saying dog a lot and barking, and he thought I was referencing him. But he is a soft, soft little dog. There's no way he would survive a tornado unless I was carrying him. He would panic. He's not who you want in an emergency. He's an absolute hot dog goober. So we hear Toby right outside the cellar door, which good on you, Toby. That is windy. I don't know how you haven't been blown away because you are like this big. And the dad opens the door to let Toby in, and I was like, oh, this must be where he dies. Like it's Toby's fault. And I was wrong about that. And thank God, because I was thinking, how could she ever have a dog again? She'd never ever forgive herself, right? Or the dog, possibly. And Toby runs in, baby Joe grabs her. The mom's there. The mom's kind of holding Joe. And then the door starts to rattle, and you can see out of the little like hatch window that they've got, like it is black. It is black, and it is wind. Stuff is moving around. Debris is around. It's afoot. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's right. It's not the dog, it's the door. Oh my gosh. And I was so hyped watching this movie. Like, thank God I'm alone because I was the loudest person in a movie. And that is kind of sometimes just the most fun way to watch a movie, especially when you've seen it before, is to be very interactive. But it's also incredibly rude if you're around anyone else or if they haven't agreed to that. It's like watching a musical with someone who's never seen it and then you just sing the whole time. I want to apologize immediately to my friend April. who I made watch Mamma Mia for the first time, and then I did absolutely sing 100% of that movie. Um, so that's my bad. I didn't do that with Twister because I was alone. Um, I was as soon as the door started to like fall apart, and he's like, "I can't hold it." I was thinking, okay, then don't. Like, let it go and run down that little staircase because the door's at the top. It's equal with the floor, and they're underground. Run down and like get in the corner. Like, go. Why are you holding on to this door that's wood that clearly doesn't want to be here anymore? Um, he doesn't let go, guys. He doesn't let go. He's holding on to it, and then him and the door just take a little trip to death because they're dead. Well, the door is a door, so he's dead. And she starts screaming, the little girl. She's screaming for her dad, and she's holding Toby, or Toby's in the court. Toby's fine. The dog is fine. That's very important. And then the mom has to grab her because she starts like walking towards it because she, like me, fascinated by it. Scared but fascinated, right? And I just thought, the representation. Keep in mind, the first time I saw this movie, I was probably about 4 years old. So I was probably around the same age. And yeah, you get this feeling of just like, wow, what is that? What is happening? I don't know. I'm going to call it like my scientific intellectual curiosity instead of my reckless adrenaline junkie behavior. And maybe those two don't have to be mutually exclusive, but I try not to label myself anything too negative. So now we're back to present day, which made me laugh way too hard because it's like this aerial shot of like a satellite in space and it says present day. And it's so clearly not my present day. And I was like, oh, present day for sure, for sure. Um, I don't know why in movies when we do stuff like that, we don't just put the year it's happening so that the movie ages better, right? Like if you put 1996, right? Then forever, yeah, it really was 1996. Put in present day and you see a movie 30 years later and you're just like, for sure, yeah, present day. Right. Right. Okay. Yeah, with your Microsoft Paint frickin' satellite in the sky. Stupid, whatever. Moving on. It's it's present day and we are with we got two factions here. We've got the Storm Chasers led by Joe, and then on the other hand, we got Bill Paxton, whose character is Bill, and he's with Jamie Gertz, who is his fiance, soon to be wife, and her name's Melissa. She's a sex therapist or a fertility therapist, and she is not about that tornado life. She doesn't realize it yet, but let me tell you right now, she's not about that life. Um, so he's trying to get married to Melissa, and he is not yet divorced from Joe, which, by the way, maybe you shouldn't get married so quick, man. Like, unless you were cheating and you have a lot more history with this woman than we realize, which that would be crummy in a different way. But, like, if you're not yet divorced, maybe you are rushing into things. Maybe it's a rebound. Maybe you should reconsider. Maybe you should go to therapy. You're with a therapist. How she didn't recommend that, beyond me. Moving on. So he's like, we got to go see her. We got to get the papers signed. Or like, we got to go grab the signed papers. And Melissa's like, you think she signed them? And he goes, yeah, I think she did. And then you can just tell by his face that he's like, she didn't sign that. She didn't sign it. I'm going to have to go argue with her. So he finds them in a field, which how? I don't know. They didn't have GPS really back then. And he's walking through and it's his whole old crew. I think the first one we meet is Dusty, who is credited as Dustin, but he's Dusty to his buddies, and that's me, okay? And Dusty is played by the late, great Philip Seymour Hoffman and has some of the best lines in the movie. And he's like, "Hey, Bill," and Melissa stays near the truck, and then we see all the different players. I loved seeing like Alan Ruck because I think before that I had only seen him in probably Ferris Bueller. So for me, growing up, he was from Twister. And then I saw Ferris Bueller when I was a little older. And I was like, ah! Ah, and then as a much more grown-up woman, I saw him most recently in Succession as just the most Looney Tunes, sibling. Well, kind of, but also they're all bananas. That's a totally different episode. Anyway, I like Alan Ruck. I think he's cool. He seems like he's really tall. And he is like the navigator, I want to say, because he's got the maps. And you shouldn't fold the maps, okay? Roll the maps because there's a line going right through Kansas. So we see those people, we see some other people in a caravan, with their super nice present day computers, getting all the data inside of this caravan. And then we come up on Joe, who, like I said, is played by Helen Hunt. And she's supposed to be the ex wife or soon to be ex wife of Bill Paxton's character, Bill Harding. And he's like, "You called me all the way out here. Where's the papers?" And she goes and grabs them and then hands it to him. And he takes them. He's looking through and she's like, "Well, you don't trust me?" And he's like, "I trust you." And then he's like, "But you did miss a page." And then he's like, "Why am I even here, Joe? What?" And she's just like, "It's Dorothy." And this is where we find out that Bill, who's also a meteorologist, and was storm chasing, he is becoming a weatherman now, which does sound less enticing. Um, and he had this idea, I want to say in college, I assume, for Dorothy, which is this gigantic silver like vat. And inside of it is these little circular balls that are going to go up inside of the funnel of a tornado and be able to take data from inside and help the scientists hopefully understand more about tornadoes so that they can predict them and give people more time to get to their cellar, not bunker, to get to their cellars and to get out of the way. And if you don't have a cellar, right, you need to go low away from windows, you know, like just so you're aware, if you don't have a cellar and something's happening, don't go to a top floor, don't go to a high floor. If you can, go to a room without windows. Uh, Bathrooms, usually really good choices. That's just a little survival tip from me to you. Moving on. So they, uh, she's like, "I want you to see her." And he's like, "She's here." And it's Dorothy, and we see her. Dorothy, i.e., Wizard of Oz, another wonderful callback to the Wizard of Oz and that whole tornado situation. And then she's like, "It's ready. You want to come with us?" And he's like, "I need you to sign the papers. I'm trying to live a normal, kind of boring life now." I just want to say no hate to weathermen. None whatsoever. But if you were between literally having been a storm chaser and still being pretty young and in your prime and being able to do it, and then being a weatherman, one of those sounds way less exciting. Personal opinion. So then all of a sudden they're like, "Joe, we've got a reading. We gotta go. We gotta go. We gotta go." Because that's how it goes. You don't just wait for a storm. You gotta go chase them, right? It's time. It's go time. You get the music. It's like dun 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 dun. I've seen this movie so much, because that is exactly the music. And then they start rolling out and Bill's all of a sudden like, "Wait, you didn't sign this paper." And he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna chase her down. I'm gonna catch up to her." And then Melissa's like, "We're gonna do what?" And then he's chasing and they've all got comms. Like it makes sense that the storm chasing team has comms. I'm very confused why Bill's truck has a comm because he's not been chasing, but it does. It's got a comm, that red truck, and he's like, "Hey, you know, gotta sign the paper." And she's like, "Well, we're chasing." I don't know. They go, start chasing, and then it just cuts. I think I'm gonna cut because I could talk about this movie for a year. And so they oh my god, I just saw this movie. I am having a total blank. He goes, he's being chased off, they're driving through, and then they run into the yes! Ah! Yeah, that's what happens. They run into Jonas and his team, and Jonas is played by Carrie Ewells, who, if you don't know, is Robin Hood and the Dread Pirate Roberts from Pirates from Princess Bride. And then he's done more stuff recently as well. He's in Stranger Things. I find it really bizarre because I feel like in the 80s and early 90s, Carrie Ewells was always the good guy. Wesley, or Dread Pirate Roberts, however you choose to call him. Um, and then I feel like after he's just been a villain in some way, right? He's a villain in Stranger Things. He's the villain in Twister. I can't think of something else he's been in, and I know he's been in more because I recognize him immediately. I'm gonna move on. Um, and we see him, and he like almost get runs Bill off the road, and then Melissa's like, well, who's that? And Bill's like, it's Jonas. He's in it for the money, not the science. He doesn't have any instinct, and he doesn't have Dorothy. Just straight slamming this guy, right? And Carrioles, he's got his little his headset like this, except it's black. Hold on, let me get a black pen. Black, and he's like, he just looks like a douchebag, is all I'm saying. And he's pulling up information, and then they are at the gas station at this point, I want to say. And I think Bill very much so wants to go on this run. He wants to see Dorothy fly. It is his prototype. And this is also around the same time that we get to see that Jonas, who used to be on the same team as him and Joe, as Bill and Joe, also made a prototype, except he's calling it Dot. Dot. He's calling it Dot. I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but is BS. He stole Bill's designs, and Bill sees it and immediately is like, Jonas, you son of a bitch. And I was always like, yeah, yeah, get him. And then he like has the lamest fight scene I've ever seen because he's like, you son of a bitch. And he goes to throw hands, but he just hits his cap off his head. And then he's being caught by his friends. And it's like, you could have very easily punched him in the face. No problem. Easy. 1, 2. Like, what happened? How did you only knock his cap off? You can't come in that hot and then just knock someone's cap off. I do that. I've done that to like friends as a joke. Move on. Anyway, maybe different story. So he's like, did you know? And Joe's like, yes, I know. I knew. We've got a better one. And that's where Bill is just like, yes, I'm in. We're going to see Dorothy fly right now. I'm giving you till the end of the day for us to get this off the ground. Which, if you think about it, bananas that they just know they're going to run to at least a tornado in one day. Bananas. And then Melissa's like, I'm going to go get us some lemonade. And then Joe is also inside the convenience store. Bill's standing outside and he's like looking at the clouds and he's looking at the storm system and he's doing his like tornado cowboy thing where he's going to figure out where to go. What storm system are we looking at? Which one's going to head up best and give us the best data? Now, in 1996, we used the Fujita scale F1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in terms of destruction. And that is not the same scale they used in the new movie. They used the EF scale, which is the um shoot, E. I don't remember. I just looked it up. It's the same scale. It's the Fujita scale, but it's got more data points. It's like more advanced, and that's what we're using nowadays. That's just a little offshoot. Maybe in the next one I'll have remembered what the E stands for. Um anyway, so we're using the F scale still in 1996. And Joe goes inside, she grabs herself a coffee, and Melissa's like, hey, I don't blame you for still wanting him, but you can't have him. Like, please move on. Pretty kind, honestly. And then Joe's just like, okay, buys their lemonade as well as her coffee. And she's like, gotta go. And then we see Jonas in the corner, and his team's like, Jonas, which way are we going? And then he's like, I don't know, give me a minute. And Joe's like, ugh, typical. And Melissa's like, what's typical? And I love it. I love every minute of this movie. And then she's like, he's waiting to see what Bill does. And she's like, why is that man waiting for Billy? And then basically, because Bill's got them instincts, right? He knows what's going to happen. So Jonas has to wait it out because he doesn't have any instincts because he's in it for the money, not the science. Which I don't know why it's just like the best slam in my opinion. And I wish I could use it more in my life without it being completely out of context. But as I am not a scientist, I don't get to use it unless I'm talking about this movie. Anyway, so then Bill is in the truck with Joe. Melissa's driving Bill's truck, the red one. Joe's got Dorothy in the back of her yellow truck, and they're going towards this tornado. And then they get too close. Then they get stuck in a trench, and they're like, get out of there, get out of there. And he's like, I'm trying to get out of there. Do you want to drive? And I think everyone can just hear Bill and Joe fighting over the comms all the time. And they're like, get out of there, get out of there. And he can't, he's stuck. Melissa's in the far back. She's behind Dusty because Dusty's like the least likely to be in harm's way, I guess. And that's where Bill was like, just stay behind Dusty. He'll keep you safe, whatever. And then, um, we've already had Dusty explaining to Melissa the suck zone and everything like that while Bill was trying to get the paper signed. And Melissa is just like this very proper and polite, obviously incredibly educated woman. And this is just not her bag of like rowdy heathens. But if you think about it, everyone there, like Melissa probably at least has a master's, probably a PhD if she's a doctor, like a therapist. She's probably got a doctorate and everyone else is scientists. But it's just like, look how wonderful you can just see. Like, everyone here is incredibly educated, but totally different in terms of vibes and personality. They're not stuffy. I wouldn't say Melissa's stuffy, but like I said, she's very proper. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's one thing that in the entirety of Twister, at no point am I like, ugh, Melissa. It's just like, oh, it's not right, but it's not that she's bad. And I love when they do characters like that because I feel like the trope is always if you want someone to be with the old, flame, the new person is always crummy, right? Think Meredith in The Parent Trap. She's a monster and she's all, she's no fun and she's totally uptight. Melissa is just living her life and doing her thing, and she's just getting stuck in the middle of this. And I don't blame her. I think she's great. I think Jamie Gertz does a great job. I just wanted to say that. Anyway, so they're stuck in this trench. They can't get it out. That twister's coming way fast. And then Bill's like, we gotta go. We gotta get out. And there's like this, I don't know, it's like a little it's like a wood bridge, but I don't think it's going anywhere above where the trench is. It's probably how people were getting into the field, even though there's a trench. And so they, oh, I think I have a package. 1 second, please. Okay, I've got my package. So now we're in the trench and they can't get out. They're stuck in this gully. And Joe is like, okay, let me get Dorothy out. Come on, let's get her ready. And Bill's like, you joking? You can't. And she's like, you don't have your nerve. She might have said that already. And basically, that tornado is way too close for them to be able to set it up so that Dorothy can actually fly and do what she needs to do. And Bill's like, come on, come on. And they get under that little, bridge in the trench. And they're underneath it and they're in the wood. And Joe is like holding on really tight. And Bill is holding on here and like standing to the top. He's not holding her at all. And I was just like, oh, what an interesting like way to show that he's trying to keep his distance from her, with like the blocking and the way that the directors are putting these characters. So he's not touching her. And then she starts like crawling out to see the tornado because once again, she's sick like me and incredibly fascinated and she's like, I want to see it. And he's like, what are you doing? You were being reckless. Get back here. And so she's like, I want to see it. I want to see it. And he's like, no. And he has to like grab her and pull her back in and throw her towards not throw her, but like push her. That also sounds aggressive. He has to very it's aggressive. Okay, he has to pull her and get her under to the wood beam again, and so she starts holding on, and it goes over. The truck is gone, and then everyone's like, Bill, Bill, Joe, Bill, Joe, because they're much further behind. They're not in that lead vehicle. And they're like, come in, come in. They don't have comms anymore. That truck is somewhere. And then they come out, it blows over. They come out and they're looking around, and Joe's just like, where's my truck? And then the whole team pulls up, and they're pulling up, and then we see Melissa, and right in front of Melissa, boom, the truck lands upside down. Still got Dorothy inside of it, so that's a bummer. And she's like, and she drives around it like a freaking champ, honestly. Doesn't crash the car, doesn't hit the truck that just fell in front of her. Like, pretty stellar. And then Dustin comes out and sees her, and he's like, did you just almost get hit by that truck? And she's like, free. She's like, ah. And he's like, look at you. And, like, you did it. You're fine. And he's all enthusiastic. And this is where you see where she is like, this is not the life for me. And I don't know. It makes me laugh so hard because she's having a completely justified reaction, and no one else seems to even think that it's a big deal. And I think that's really funny and indicative of all of their characters. And then Bill runs up to her, and Bill is just like, oh honey, are you okay, are you okay? And she's like, Billy, and he's like, are you okay? And then Joe's like, well, here's my truck, blah blah blah, it is what it is. And then uh Jonas, I want to say Jonas pops through here at this point. Obviously has missed the tornadoes. Everyone's like, good timing. And then Dusty is like, good timing. Losers, losers, move on, which is one of the best lines of the film. And then they keep driving. They see that there's like a wreck there. They don't stop to help or check on anything. Jonas is a real diva. He's just like, "Ugh, whatever. Me and my fancy headset, we gotta go." Um, and so they just keep driving. I don't know what they do with the truck, because then I feel like then Joe is in the truck with Melissa and Bill, and they're arguing, but they're coming up on like more tornadoes. This is where we got twins, which is also one of the best lines of the movie. And then we got cows is also right around now, because Melissa's sitting in the car and she's getting called by her patients. And she's got some of the just silliest lines, because I'm pretty sure she at one point says, no, she did not marry you. She did not marry your penis. Okay, well, she didn't only marry your penis. And I'm just like, what? What is this conversation? And she's like, I gotta go. We got cows, because Cal goes by and Joe's like, Cal. And it goes by and she goes, another cow. And Bill's like, I think that's the same cow. And so Melissa going, we got cows. I was just like, I don't know. It's one of my favorite things from being a kid. And I used to say that all the time. And we did not have cows. I don't know what I was talking about. I think that's the original, just like pre-internet saying stuff that you saw in a movie or something, like calling it back. And that was one of mine. Um, so they're in that tornado, and then, gosh, there's so many tornadoes. And then I think it's at this point that the team is like, you know where we're close to? We're close to Wakita, where Aunt Meg is. And then Joe's like, no, we're not going to go bother my aunt. And everyone's like, food, food. So we go to Wakita. We meet Aunt Meg. And Aunt Meg brings everybody steak and potatoes. There are rolls, but I forgot. And makes famous gravy for the potatoes. And so everyone's eating and telling stories. And we hear about everyone's explaining to Melissa like the Fujita scale, what is it? Well, what would an F5 look like, is what she says. And they go, like the finger of God. And she's like, has anyone ever seen one of those? Joe has walked off and she's showering at this point. And Bill just goes, yeah, one of us. And that's when you're like, oh, the little girl was Joe, took her family and her house. Oh my gosh. What? Oh, character backstory. Wow. So they're talking about that. Then they're talking about meeting Bill and how Bill was a wild child, basically. and they met him. He was naked with a bottle of whiskey, and he screaming at the tornado and throws the bottle into the tornado, and it never hit the ground. And then everybody's laughing. Bill's like, "No, no, honey, that's it. They're not talking about me. They're not talking about me. That's not me. That's another Bill, an evil Bill, and I killed him." And then everyone just goes wild. And I just so badly wish I had like this type of group of friends just hyped up on stuff like that. And you could tell she's like, this is not the life for me, you know? So they all have a meal and we're talking to Meg. And I think one of my favorite parts is that Alan Ruck's character is like, "Hey Meg, um, you got a lot of beef." And she goes, "Well, yeah. You see my cows up front?" And he goes, "No." And she goes, "Oh." And I was just like, oh my God, if that is not a Southern woman, like, I don't know what is. Dusty absolutely loves her and like gives her a kiss, and she has extra food for him. And then they have to run off because another storm is coming. And then maybe this is when cows happens. I don't know. There's a lot of tornadoes and I get too hyped. So is what it is. So then we hit the point in the movie where, um, yeah, we hit the motel and we can see Melissa's just kind of like, "What am I doing here?" And mm-hmm, got it. I know where I'm at. So we leave Meg's house, and then they do go and they chase another tornado. Melissa rides with Dusty. It's just Joe and Bill in the red truck, and they are arguing again because there's a gigantic one. This is when we got twins, and then they go together, and he's like, "Where is it? Where is it?" And he's like, "I think he's right. It's gonna rear its ugly head right here." And it does. And they're trying to back up and get away from it, and it is not going smooth. They're stuck because there's like a branch, not like a limb, like a whole gigantic. Which one's bigger? Whichever one's bigger, where it's not the whole tree. And it's stuck under the truck, and they're trying to move and they're trying to move, and there's like a tricycle comes through it. And then an 18 wheeler is in that one, and they are stuck. They got really close. And then they tried to get Dorothy off, and Dorothy is too light, I think is the problem. Like the pieces inside aren't going up the way they need to. They're not being held by the tornado. They're being dispersed too fast or something. Like the data isn't giving enough information. And Joe is just like screaming about it, and it's her life work. And he's like, "Get in the car, Joe." Like, and she's like, "You don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like to see it. Go miss this house and miss that house and go right after yours." And he's like, "Jesus, Joe, is that what you think it did?" And he's like, "It's horrible, but it was a long time ago, and you have to let it go. You have to let it go and notice there are people here for you." And she's like, "Who?" And he's like, "I'm here, Joe. And I just want you to remember that they have the comms. Everyone can hear this conversation." He's like, "I'm here." And she's just looking, and you can see Melissa really being like, "Oh gosh." So they're having that fight, and then we cut to the motel. I knew there was a twister in between there. Then we cut to the hotel, and or the motel, and it's a motel near a drive-in. And so Melissa is sitting in the motel, and Bill's walking out to get coffee at like the drive-in's concession stand, as far as I can tell. And he's like, "Hey, I think they're too light. What if we need to maybe do some adjustments?" And so they kind of talk about that without addressing the elephant in the room. That is, he obviously loves Joe, and he just left because she got too obsessive with this work. And then we see like Melissa just sitting in the room, and she's just like traumatized from her day. She has had quite the day. And then you see wind chimes, and they're kind of in those like they're spinning and going, and things are getting a little slower, and you're just like, "Oh." And then you hear the music that like, "Ah, ah." That means a tornado's coming in this movie, you guys. And they're looking around, and the wind starts to pick up, and then Joe is like, "Get down, get down, everyone get down, get," and then everyone's running around, They go underground to, I have no idea what it is. Car comes through. One of the crew gets like his head is sliced. Bill holds on to Melissa because she came out when she started hearing it happen. And here we go. There's another one. And then they pop out. They're all really shaken up. A lot of their, like, the caravan is trashed. And then they go, hey, the news is saying that there's another one. It's headed right to Wakita, which we know is where Aunt Meg is. And everyone's like, we got to go. We got to go right now. We got to go save Aunt Meg. And I agree. We have to because that woman's a treasure. And so um, Bill's like, honey, like, we have to go get Meg. And she goes, okay, you go on. And he's like, yeah, you stay here. You'll be safe in the motel. And she goes, I won't be here when you get back. And he's like, what? And she goes, basically, she's like, I'm out, bro. And he's like, what? And she goes, and you know what? I'm not even that sad about it. And I don't know what that means, Billy. And he's like, I'm so sorry. And she's like, it's no one's fault. Bye. And then that's it. There we go. Melissa's gone. Which, where is she driving off to in the middle of all these tornadoes? Right? Like, is that safe? And so she's out. And Bill and Joe go to find Meg. Meg's house is just destroyed. And we can hear her dog. We did get like one interstitial of like her watching TV and then her being like, what? And I remember watching this as a kid, like around one of the first times, and being like, oh my gosh, is she dead? And being very upset. She's not. They find her. They're able to patch her up because her dog stayed with her and is barking. Moose, wonderful dog. And she's like, get Moose. And they grab him and they get him out of the house. And as soon as they do that, the house just collapses. And you're just like, oh. And then Joe is like, no one had any warning. And Aunt Meg is like, it was already here by the time the sirens came on. I didn't even have time to get downstairs. And that's where you're just like, geez, this is a real problem. And so she doesn't even have time to get downstairs. And they get her in an ambulance and she's like, I'll drive myself. And then Alan Rick's character is like, sweetie, your car is in a tree around the corner. And she's like, oh, stop making a fuss over me. And he's like, you got a broken wrist and a concussion and all of that stuff. And this is where they're just like, okay, now we really got to make Dorothy work. And they do, right? Like, Meg is going to go to the hospital and they start putting like aluminum can pieces on Dorothy, I think to just make her fly better, be more aerodynamic. I'm not doing the science, so I don't fully understand. But they basically are just like adding these pieces to all of the little baubles that are inside Dorothy 4, I want to say at this point, because we've already lost 2, maybe 3 and they had 4 prototypes. So, or at least 4. And so they're doing all of that. And then it is the next day, right? We definitely hit an EF5 for this final one. And I think the big piece is that they're all in the trucks and they see where it's going and it switches its path and Jonas ends up being really close and they're screaming at him on the comms. They're like, Jonas, Jonas, get out of there, get out of there. And Jonas is like ignoring him and his driver guy is like, they would never put us in harm's way, like maybe we should be listening. And he turns it off and he's like, let it go. And then immediately, boom, sucked up. And while it's being sucked up, a beam goes straight through the driver. So we know he's dead. But Jonas could definitely still be alive because he's just. And so everyone's just like watching. And then the truck lands and it lands upside down and then just explodes. And Robin Hood is dead. There's Jonas in this movie. But yeah, that's how Carrie Hill's character dies. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And so that happens. And then they're trying to set up Dorothy. And I don't know if they couldn't get it off the truck or if the truck is stuck or something. Something happens where they're just going to have to leave the truck. And they do. They get her all fixed up and they leave the truck. And then she gets pulled up and the data's being taken. Oh my gosh, we're going to save the world. Wonderful, wonderful. Tornado's still coming. And Joe and Bill are on foot and they're running. They're running. They end up driving through a house before they lose the truck, right? Because the house is like debris and it's rolling. and they have to drive through the house, and that's one of my favorites because he's like holding on, and he's like, "We're going!" And they drive through it, and they kind of like drive up the stairs, but they still land on the road. And I don't understand how that works, but it's so fun. So they go through the house, and they're still driving. They lose it. Now they're running. They're running so fast, and they're like they run through this barn and they get in there and it has to be like a butcher's barn. It is just scythes and knives and like and Bill was like, I don't think so. I don't feel like being sliced in half, I don't think. And so they keep running and they like attach themselves to like these metal water pipes using leather straps. And look, like you have to suspend your disbelief for a lot of these things. But for me, I had to really suspend it at this point because they are in the middle of what's assumed to be an EF5, like a big, big boy. And they're literally being like pulled in the air and they're like weightless basically with these leather straps and just wouldn't they have been ripped in half at the very least? On top of the fact that literally none of the debris happens to hit them for the 30 seconds that they're inside of this. I'm just wondering, like, no debris hits them. Okay, they're the heroes, so we don't really want them to die. But then also, they don't get ripped in half. And this is the point of the movie where because Bill is now caring about Joe again, he's like holding on to her. And he holds her, and then helps, and then everything dies down. The team runs up and they're like, "We did it! You guys are insane!" Blah blah blah. And it's all hype and everything. And then he's like, "Look at that sky!" And Joe's like, "I've seen enough skies." And she turns and she kisses Bill, and that's the end of the movie. And it's fantastic. It's wonderful. It's magical. I love it so, so much. I'm going to go ahead and eat my steak and potatoes now with our famous Aunt Meg gravy. I hope you enjoyed hearing about this movie and the recap and my thoughts and feelings, which is basically just a recap of me being so freaking happy and excited. And I am going to eat and then I'm going to go see Twisters again so that I can make sure my notes are correct. I'll come back and film that and then I'll post both of these episodes around the same time so that you can just dive straight through both of them. But spoiler alert, Twisters is good. Okay? You can also read my article on Medium if you'd like for Twister. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope if you live in Tornado Alley, you stay nice and safe. And if you've got any ideas, want to correct me, want me to do someone else or a different film or TV show, anything, just give me some information, right? Send me a little comment down below. And then please don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye, babes.